Okay, we should be live now.
Okay, good morning and welcome to those who are joining us at London TravelWatch. This is our public board meeting, and we've got an interesting set of discussions today, and we will have the Commissioner of Transport for London attending shortly, Andy Byford, who'll give us an overview of where things are across Transport for London. So it'll be an interesting session to come. So there will be the opportunity to tweet during this if there are any questions that are coming in. If we're able to take any of those for Andy Byford, we certainly will do. But in the meantime, we'll continue with our own agenda to start with before Andy joins us shortly after 10:30. So first of all, I'd just like to check if there are any apologies for absence. I don't believe there are. I think everybody's here from the board. And do we have any declarations of interest? Okay. And so just to start off really with a little bit of an update on my activities, just very briefly. A lot of work has been done in recent weeks in discussion with the Transport Committee at London Assembly about budgets for next year. As you'll know, there's a lot of discussion, has been discussion between the Mayor's Office and the government over funding for Transport for London. I'm sure we'll talk about that with Andy Byford very shortly. But there is an ongoing impact, obviously, on other budgets across the Assembly, across the Mayor's budget, and that affects ourselves as well. So at a sort of top line level, we have had those discussions. We've had both private discussions with the Transport Committee, and Emma and I also had a public meeting with them in October, where we covered a lot of the ground, and essentially we were being asked, what is it that Transport, so London TravelWatch actually does? What money do we need? And what are the priorities going forward? And so I think we've put a pretty compelling case, and certainly Emma was able to talk quite openly about what it is that could be lost if our budget was reduced. We're expecting to have more detail from the Assembly quite shortly in terms of what the budgets are likely to be, and so I think that's going to be the next stage, and in the next couple of weeks I think we'll have a much clearer idea. We've also been having discussion about our accommodation and what the opportunities might be for saving some costs on that, and we've had some good discussions led by Emma and Richard with our landlord, and hopefully we can take that forward as quickly as possible. I am just checking from time to time that everyone can hear. If we could just nod, because I'm conscious of connections at the moment, so I don't want to just disappear into another world. Emma, I don't know if there's anything you want to add on that in terms of our discussions with the Assembly. It's obviously it is quite fluid, and things are moving at a pace, but I think for the moment we probably haven't got anything concrete that we can say.
No, I haven't got anything to add on that one, Arthur. Okay,
all right, thank you. And now we haven't got Anthony with us today, who's the joint chief executive of Transport Focus and London TravelWatch. Clearly there are discussions continuing with Transport Focus in terms of how we can ensure that we have as little duplication as possible, and that was one of the themes of the discussion with the Transport Committee. I think actually we've achieved a huge amount in the first 6 months of our agreement with Transport Focus, and whether it be on finance, IT, HR, and certainly around the work that Susan and her team have been doing on casework. There's no question that we've been able to reduce duplication, I think, and it's been very effective. And I know there've been also work that we've done in terms of consultations that Tim and others have been involved in, which again I think we've been able to reduce the amount of of duplication. So a lot has been done. There's always more that can be done in terms of efficiencies, but I think so far we've made some pretty significant strides, and I think the Transport Committee have recognised that there have been some real results already. So we'll carry on in that vein, and we'll work obviously closely with the Transport Committee and Transport Focus to be able to reduce costs and any inefficiencies that might be there. Okay. So has anyone got any questions in terms of my own opening remarks? Okay. All right, so can we move on then to the minutes of the last meeting, which was back in September. I went through them with Luke, so I'm comfortable with them, but can I just check if there's anybody that's got any particular issues or amendments that they want to make? Okay, I only hear silence, so that, you are all on mute, so that will be the case. But if anyone has anything that they want to raise, please put up your hand. No. Okay, so we'll move forward and approve those minutes. So thank you, Luke, for putting those together, and I will sign those off separately. Right, and if we could move on then just to matters arising. Bear with me 1 second. Right. Emma, is there anything you want to talk through on these? It looks like we've made good progress on them, but is there anything you want to particularly draw attention to?
Sorry, I was just going off mute and trying to look at the document at the same time.
Oh, right, okay.
No, not particularly. I think everything's on track. We are, the risk register is now, version 1 is finalised, and we'll be talking about that later in the meeting. We've our head of casework, Susan James, has been communicating with the Rail Ombudsman in the light of the discussion we had with them at the last board meeting. And the changes that were requested made to the casework reports to make them even clearer have been made on this occasion. So no, I don't think there's anything major to say on those.
Can I just ask, please?
Yeah.
We sent some examples to the Ombudsman about out-of-scope cases. I wonder whether we'd heard back from them on actions that they might be able to take to extend their remit. Have we had a response?
Alan, at the moment there's ongoing discussions regarding the Ombudsman because their contract is due up next year. So I don't know whether there's things like that coming up in the pipeline. So at this stage, I don't think anything will be changed or other organisations will be onboarded until that matter's been discussed, which will probably be in the next ADR scheme council early in December.
Okay, super, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Susan, for that. And in terms of the report that we'll have from you later, Susan, you'll be able to give us a bit of an update in terms of up to date, anything that's bang up to date. I recognise that your report by necessity has to be slightly behind the times because it's got to pull together statistics and whatever, and it's got to fit in with our cycle of meetings as well as Transport Focus. But I think you're going to be able to add just a bit of anecdotal information as well later.
Yes, of course, Arthur.
That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, so are people comfortable with the matters arising? Good. Okay. Right, so we're slightly ahead. I don't know if Andy Byford is yet available, but we can move on to another item if not, Luke.
He's not on the call just yet, but yeah, should be in the next 5 minutes or so.
Okay. Right. Perhaps we could just start off, and we'll go into a bit more detail later, Emma, but I just wonder if there's anything that you wanted to sort of flag up now around your director's report that people can be considering, and then obviously we'll come back to the detail of it a bit later. But there's obviously been a lot of activity in the last couple of months since the last board meeting. I just wondered if there's anything you wanted to raise for now. Emma, sorry, I can't hear you, Emma. I think you might be on mute.
Apologies, Arthur.
Okay.
No, things are going very well. Our media profile is still rising, which I think is testament to the relevance of the work that we're doing at the moment. And our biggest kind of success, I guess, that I'll talk about later, is the establishment of our new digital community of transport users. And our numbers on that community are continuing to grow. And kind of initial indications are that these people, there are around kind of 4,000 of them at the moment, are very engaged and like being asked their opinions on issues related to transport in London. So that's a really good sign, and we're very excited about that piece of work.
Yeah, I think the progress that's been made on that has been phenomenal from a standing start. It's something we haven't been able to do before. We haven't attempted to do before, but I think I know Richard and others have been leading on this. I think it's given us an insight and a very sort of timely insight into what people are thinking. We're not pretending it's a sort of empirical information, but it does give us some real knowledge, snapshot knowledge of what people are doing, what people are thinking. And I think this will grow as things move forward. And so, Richard, thanks for pulling this together. I know Trevor is not with us today at the moment, but he's done a lot of analysis of the figures as well, which has been really, really helpful. Richard, is there anything that you wanted to add around the digital community? Because there's quite a lot of activity that we probably don't even see. We just see the sort of the results, but you're seeing more in the background. Is there anything you wanted to add there?
Well, I think we're finding it's a bit of a sort of virtuous circle. Once we're gaining the email addresses and the contacts of people who are really engaged, they're then getting involved in things, sharing things, and then when we're doing using other means to reach people, we're finding other people are leaving their details as well, and it's growing organically now following the initial sort of advert campaign. So I think there's lots of scope to sort of grow it organically and to keep going, and it should build up a bit of a critical mass and continue.
Good. Okay, well, that's really helpful, and we'll come back and talk about it later on, but I just thought it was an opportunity for people just to be aware of the issues before we come on to Emma's report a little later. I see now we have Andy Byford, I think not sure if he's in the waiting room or he's actually with us. Andy, can you hear us?
Yes, I can, Arthur. How are you?
I'm really well. Oh, that's fantastic. We get to see you as well. That's good. Welcome to our board meeting, Andy. Thanks for sparing the time at an extremely busy time for you, I know. So just by way of introduction, and many of you do know Andy's history, but to members of the public who perhaps don't, Andy joined as Commissioner of Transport for London back in May, just as things were getting pretty interesting in this country and across the world. Of course, everything was changing at that time. Andy, I don't suppose any of that was put on your on the job description when you applied for the role, but you'll, I'm sure, talk through with us the many changes that have taken place. But Andy has a very interesting background in terms of transport, having worked in this country and in Australia. Also worked in Toronto as CEO of the Toronto Transit Commission, and then later as president of the New York Transit Authority. So with a lot of experience internationally, and also a fair bit of experience in this country as well. So he brings a global view, and probably at an incredibly important time to have that that global perception of things, because we are dealing with big issues clearly in terms of the pandemic, and I think there's things that London, I'm sure, can teach other cities, but also can learn from other cities. So it's great to have somebody of Andy's background in this position. So Andy, I won't take up any more of your time, and I'll be led by you. If I think I'm sure you want to say a bit first, and then if you're okay, we're open to questions. We have asked the public if they'd like to put questions into you, and we'll see if they come through. But certainly, board members will have questions for you.
Well, that's great. Well, thanks for that kind introduction. And I thought I might just speak just for a very short while and then allow maximum time for questions, because I think those are the most insightful part for the members. And also it'd be great to get questions from the public. So yeah, you did a nice little summary of my resume. I mean, my background is operations, but customer service. I've been doing this now for 31 years, which seems incredible to me, since starting as a uniformed station foreman on the tube. At Regent's Park was my first station. But I've always had a passion for customer service, and I cringe when we deliver bad customer service. And you know, whether I'm accountable for that or if I'm at the receiving end of it, I find it very frustrating. So I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I like to get things right. I'm probably my own biggest self-critic. In the, you know, if you don't feel that you've done your job as well as you could do that day, I reflect upon it, and I want to do better. So I certainly don't need any more motivation really to serve customers. At the end of the day, sometimes people used to say to me in New York, who's your boss? Is it the mayor or is it the governor? Well, technically it was the governor, but I always used to say it's the customers, actually. I mean, ultimately the customers pay my wages. They pay the wages of TfL staff. So and we're not here to just run a train set or a bus set. We are actually there to deliver a service for people. So again, people sometimes say to me, is it a business or a service? I think it's a service, but it should be run on business-like lines. So anyway, what I've said since I got here, and I did know obviously that this would be a tough gig. I mean, it's the reason I put in for this job, actually. I like tough challenges. The TTC wasn't exactly a walk in the park. The customer service reputation of the TTC at the time was woeful for various reasons. It was constantly in the Toronto Sun, constantly in the Star, being castigated for perceived really bad customer service. So we really focused on that as an executive team, and I had to build a new exec team in Toronto, and I was very proud of them. And we put together a plan, a 5-year plan based on a vision which we developed, which was a transit system that makes Toronto proud. Well, I was very proud. 5 years later, we won the APTA, American Public Transportation Association, the APTA Outstanding Transit System of the Year Award, which is no mean feat. So that was very much the result of the employees' work, our colleagues. Everyone really pulled together to deliver concurrently 5 mega projects, in addition to really focusing on the basics of the service. And you'll see, I'm particularly obsessed about getting the basics right. If you can't get the basics right, and back in the day, I remember turning up at the TTC, the trackside walls were filthy off the subway. You could see where people had thrown cups of coffee at them. You know, you'd see a big splat, and it hadn't been cleaned for weeks. And my view is customers would stand on the platform and think they can't even get that right. So you've got to get the basics right, because to me, it's a proxy or a direct measure of a management team's capability. Can you get the basics right? The punctuality, the cleanliness, the customer service, the reliability. And there's always more to do to improve. So I was I really enjoyed working in Toronto, and that was something that will always resonate with me for, you know, as a happy memory of my time in Canada. Moving to New York was a bit of a different challenge in that again, it's a tough gig, actually. The politics there are quite vicious, and at the time we're just coming out of what was called the summer of hell, with all sorts of problems with derailments and people stuck on trains, and the woeful punctuality, sub 60% punctuality on the subway. It's 59 or 58.5, something like that. We again really focused on basics, taking out unnecessary speed restrictions, safely speeding up service where there was absolutely no reason why signal timers were wrongly calibrated. We fixed all of that stuff. We really pushed on tackling the root causes of delay on the bus routes. We really focused on getting the dwell times right at stations. By the end of 2 years, and it was only 2 years, that wasn't by design, it just so happened that I felt it was, I had to leave really. We'd driven punctuality from sub 60 to over 80%. Which again was down to my team. It was again a bit of a rebuild in terms of the executive team. But we also, for the future, put together a plan which was predicated around re-signaling the subway, reimagining the bus network, making the system fully accessible, which I think is a moral imperative, by the way, and absolutely pushing ahead on customer service improvements. And that secured $32 billion funding from the state legislature, all up in the air, of course, with COVID, but that I'm proud of as a legacy. But anyway, coming here, I knew what I'd be walking into. Obviously, there's the prevailing problem here, or the challenge of COVID. So it seemed to me there was that plus Crossrail are the two big ticket items in terms of the immediate priorities. There's lots of other stuff to do. Obviously, ongoing focus, all out focus on safety and security, and a relentless focus on customer service and getting customer service right, and on addressing customer needs, identifying customer needs, and designing service to best meet customer needs and stakeholder expectations. And also doing that through highly motivated, well-trained, well-managed colleagues, frontline colleagues. So those are the three strands, if you will, that run through everything that we do. There's various projects to be finished off, such as the bank improvement work, so the additional capacity at bank, the Northern Line extension, which will open next year, the Barking Riverside extension, which will open in 2022, the full electrification of the bus fleet, which we really want to push on with. But then there's those two big ticket items that I talked about. Those are the two key priorities that I've set the organization from day one. So those are to finish Crossrail off and get the Elizabeth line open in the safest, quickest possible time. So what I've said is, I've said this publicly, the Crossrail board, before they finished up their work, they resigned, and pushed, actually, I mentioned it in my job interview that I had to have, we absolutely, it could be non-negotiable, it was a showstopper for me in my job interview. TfL must take immediate control of Crossrail if we're to get the line open in the safest, earliest possible time frame. So I'm very appreciative of the support I got from DFT, from the board, from the mayor, and for that matter, from the outgoing CRL board, that we achieved that transfer of responsibility within 95 days of starting together as a new team. Why do I think that's important? Because I think one of the many things that has dogged the Crossrail project is a Byzantine form of government. It's just governance. It's been the CEO has to spend more time reporting than doing. That's ridiculous. I want him to be doing the doing. I'll deal with the politics and I'll deal with the sort of public optics of the project. I want him to get on with the doing. So that plus, I would feel vulnerable as a CEO. I would feel vulnerable. I think my predecessor was left vulnerable by having a project as critical as Crossrail at arm's length. And also, it's only by having it directly under your control and by having the sword of Damocles of accountability hanging over you, and I have no problem with that, it's only by having that pressure on you that you drive a project to completion. So that's what we're going to do. So the CRL board in their dying days have declared that October 21 is no longer possible, and that the phase 3 of Crossrail, the Elizabeth line, will open in the first half of 2022, and that's the section from Liverpool Street through to Paddington. And that the other phase is to connect it end to end from Shenfield in the east to Reading and Heathrow in the west, will open about a year later, beginning of 2023. And that because of that slippage and because of the on cost of that slippage, an additional £450 million will be needed over the 750 already declared. So that's £1.1 billion more. So that's the public declaration. First half of 2022 for the central section, and £1.1 billion more. I'm going to say to you today, no more than I publicly said we will not, it will not slip any further, and we will need no further recourse to public funds over what's already been announced. But I don't mind saying to you, and I mentioned it to Arthur in our little meeting the other day, our intro meeting, obviously we're aiming to do better than that. So I'll leave it there. We're aiming to do better than that. And I'm leaving nothing to chance. We've just brought in an expert with whom I previously worked in Toronto, actually. Two experts, actually. One is a stations completion expert. And the reason we brought him in is a couple of the stations are lagging behind. To me, open means open. It doesn't mean a phased opening. It doesn't mean none stopping an unfinished station. Open means open. So I want this guy. He's an absolute world-class practitioner at finishing off construction sites. His mandate, he started 2 weeks ago, is get them finished. The other person we're bringing in will be a direct report to the CEO, Mark Wilde, who is himself now a direct report to me. And his expertise, he was my project director for a subway extension in Toronto. His expertise is getting the coordination of projects right, such that you bring it in on time as per the revised schedule. So watch this space. We're aiming to do better on both fronts, but I'm not committing to that publicly. At the moment, the public statement remains the public statement, but we recognize the critical need to get Crossrail Elizabeth line open in terms of the revenue that it will add to the bottom line, in terms of the morale and reputation for London, and also in terms of getting additional capacity for London's subway network, which is obviously very important because of the need to do social distancing. So that's priority number one. Equal priority number two is to drive TfL through and beyond COVID. And that takes a number of forms. That means safely rebuilding the customer base, not entirely within our gift. It depends on, are these big companies in the West End and the City and Canary Wharf, are they going to repopulate those offices or not? I'm a great believer in London. I can't, there's lots of doom and gloom merchants out there who said that's it for London. Rubbish. It's a world city. I can't see that London won't recover. The issue for me is what will be the speed of that recovery. I don't doubt there'll be some softening in ridership. I don't doubt that there'll be some change in people's habits and working from home. But I do believe that London will bounce back over time. So we've got to be ready for that. So safely rebuild the ridership. And that's why we focus so heavily to date on cleaning the system. It's cleaner than it's ever been in terms of social distancing. Even though there's not that many people riding out there, there's less now than because we've got the second lockdown. That means running service to the max such that you can provide social distancing. And that means providing a controlled environment, insisting that people either wear a mask or an exemption badge, and increasingly we're seeing better rates of compliance. We're not messing about with that. We are insisting it's either or. So that's the first element, rebuilding the ridership. Second element, rebuilding the morale of the organization. At the end of the day, TfL is not immune to the impacts of COVID. The organization has taken a hit. It's really knocked people for six. A lot of working from home, people on furlough, a lot of uncertainty linked to the budget. So we have to rebuild that morale. And the third one is the big elephant in the room, of course, the budget. So I came in just after Mike had successfully negotiated the H1 settlement, first half of the year. And very rapidly, I was embroiled right in the detail of doing the H2 settlement, which we concluded just a few weeks ago, a couple of weeks ago, with 14 minutes to go to midnight, 23:46. We concluded the H2 settlement after grueling negotiations with DfT, the Treasury, and Number 10. So the good news is we got 6 months funding. It's a floating mechanism that can provide up to £1.8 billion, potentially higher, depending on the ridership and the assumptions around the model and the ridership and the revenue that falls out of that. But it didn't come without conditions. There were conditions. I wasn't expecting a blank check. It's not unreasonable that government should want some conditions for in return for a funding deal. And sure enough, there were conditions, including one of £160 million of additional savings that we have identified that, but before anyone asks, do not come from slashing service. I do not believe in slashing service. I do not believe in cutting your way out of a crisis. Yes, we should be seeking to be efficient, but if you cut back on basic maintenance, and if you slash service, you're on a slippery slope and it's hard to recover. And then the second element of that funding deal gave me some hope. I have said many times since I got here that we must move beyond this brinkmanship. We can't keep having these last minute 6-month deals. That doesn't work for anyone. Try running a £10 billion organization and not knowing month by month what your money is. It's ridiculous. So we are working with government now to put together a long-term funding settlement, which will be less reliant on income through the fare box. It must be diversified. It's wholly irresponsible to continue to rely on 72% fare box recovery as the when it's so vulnerable to crises such as this, where ridership suddenly plummets. So I hope that gives you a flavour of what we've been up to. It's the most surreal start to any job I've ever had. I have not met the vast majority of my colleagues. I've only seen them on screens such as this. But I have been out and about a lot. I've been to the Northern Line extension. I've been to Bank. I've been to most of the Crossrail stations. Been out on the cable car, on the DLR, on the overground. I'd spend a lot of time in the field because I like to talk to customers. I like to see the frontline colleagues, and I like to experience for myself what's really going on. Data is good. What your managers tell you is okay, that's fine, but you need to be out and about. You've got to use the system. I've never owned a car in my life. I ride transit. That's what I do. I rely on public transport. And I don't think you can run a transit system sitting at a desk. So I get out and about in the field. And that's how you find out what's really going on, by talking to people and by seeing for yourself what's really happening. So lots to do. I'll be now very happy, Arthur, to answer questions.
Okay, Andy, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
And I do apologise. I'm afraid I lost some connection. The joys of zooming from home. So, but anyway, we're together now, and thanks very much for really setting out the your agenda and some of the challenges, but also some of the opportunities. And I thought it was really interesting to hear you already, obviously appointing people with a view to a very positive step forward in terms of how you're dealing with London. I just wonder if I could open it up to some board colleagues in terms of some initial questions. Alan, I know you wanted to ask a little bit about the priorities, and Andy's set out his top three, but it'd be good just to perhaps have a bit more discussion on that. Alan, if you want to ask a question.
Yeah, that would be good. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Andy. You talked about what motivates you. And you talked about some of the big ticket items that TfL faces over the next 5 years or so. And you talked a little bit about what some of your priorities were. I wondered, is there anything, I mean, you've been here now for a few months, is there anything that surprised you? Has anything come up that you weren't expecting that's now a priority? You know, what are the I guess what are the things that the customers will notice in the short and medium term?
Okay, thank you. Good question, Alan. I think, well, what I've been pleasantly surprised by the absolute capability of the TfL team. I did used to work for the Tube, as I previously mentioned. I left in 2003. The analytical capability and the capability actually of the executive team is really good. This will not be a rebuild of the exec in the same way as I had to do in Toronto and New York City. This is very much a capable team. There's a bit of fine tuning to be done though. I think in terms of what customers will see, I mean, obviously COVID is all pervasive. It's pretty much defining everything. So they'll certainly see a cleaner system. I think that there's a real Dunkirk spirit amongst the employees, amongst my frontline colleagues, that we're really determined to do our bit for London. and through London, the national economy, I would argue, that we're determined to provide great service to progressively attract people back. We want to continue to relentlessly scrutinize or focus on basics and getting the basics right. We need to increasingly review our service offer to make sure that in any changes, fundamental changes that COVID brings, and I mean long-term changes, if suddenly people aren't coming into town, we're going to have a look at the balance of central London service as opposed to suburban London service. I think in terms of surprises, no, not really a surprise. I mean, I think the politics here I would say are as intense as in New York, maybe a slightly different flavor to them. I am pleased to see there is a focus on accessibility, FYI. It's a passion of mine. It was in both Toronto and in New York. So lots to do. No, I wouldn't say there was any massive surprise. I think the challenge of the financial challenge, though, is even bigger and more daunting than I thought. So all the more reason to get that long-term deal with government.
Super, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just around in terms of the priorities that you mentioned, Andy, you talked about you don't want to reduce any sort of frontline costs, any service costs. Can you just expand on that as far as you can in public? I realise it's a public session, but so where can reductions be made?
Yeah, I mean, just for clarity, it wasn't as much as I was saying we don't want to reduce frontline service costs. We absolutely do. Reduce costs. We need to be more efficient. But I'm not an advocate of slashing service. I think service, absolutely, we need to keep it under review. We're not immune, or we're not unaware of the realpolitik of COVID. It's obvious that we're going to have to flex and adjust service depending on what happens with the economy. You know, will people come back to central London? Will they come back to offices? Will the central economic zone recover? Now, I think actually it's symbiotic. I think we can play a part in aiding that recovery, and obviously the central London businesses will benefit from having an efficient transit system. But I certainly think we need to become more efficient. We should always look to become more efficient. It's not our money, it's taxpayers' money. So we are looking at further efficiencies to fine-tune the service. But I think the reason I mentioned slashing service, it's easy to do. It's a quick win. It makes for a quick buck, if you like. But it's very hard to rebuild back up. If you slash the service, service degrades, so fewer people ride, so you get less income, and so you're tempted to say, oh look, the ridership's dropped even further, we'll slash it a bit more, and so you continue down a downward spiral. That is a slippery slope, and we should avoid that at all costs. But yes, part of the 160 million savings is about identifying where we can safely save money. So we are looking to get better value out of contracts, to get better return on capital projects. We will defer a few things safely, not safety critical related stuff, by the way. That is an absolute no-no. It's a red line for me. You don't cut back on state of good repair. But we will make sensible reductions, temporary reductions in our capital program where that makes sense. We are looking to continue no unnecessary, non-essential recruitment. We have got very tight cost controls in the organization, so no discretionary spend. If you have to spend it, you have to make a case to effectively a star chamber that the CFO and I oversee. So, you know, this is good disciplined management in the face of a real fiscal challenge.
Okay, thank you very much. That's helpful to know. Laura, did you want to follow up a bit on that? I know you had you wanted to discuss a bit about services and where this goes forward.
Yeah, thank you, Arthur, and hello, Andy. Yes, I wanted to pick up on that a little bit more and just sort of check really where that 160 million can come from and whether efficiencies alone will be sufficient to do that. So it'd be good just to have a couple more words on that. But also to ask you, looking ahead to the longer term. Now, you mentioned the politics of the situation, and obviously there's a need for a longer term solution. You know, one of the things that's come up a few times in the press and other places is transparency with government, their own recommendations from KPMG. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that relationship is going to work going forward?
Mm-hmm. So, well, with the 160, I largely outlined the main elements of it. It's these are things that won't be easy to achieve, but we think that that are doable. Now, bear in mind that that's on top of the savings that we'd already identified and to which we're committed as TfL. But they're baked into our business plan already. So 160 million was, if you like, the price we had to pay to get the deal we got. So I'd say on the whole, it's a fair deal. We got a mechanism that will pay up to 1.8 billion pounds. The 160 was effectively to close the gap between what we thought we needed, what we were certain we needed, and what we actually got. But we believe that with careful fiscal management and some deferrals, we can achieve that figure, and we have to make it. The longer term plan is absolutely essential. As I said in my opener, what it can't be, we can't just keep relying on fare box recovery, because one, it's proven to be vulnerable to circumstances such as COVID. You're dangerously over-reliant on one source of income. And secondly, you can't keep gouging the customers. You can't keep just putting up prices, A, because that's just morally not sustainable, and B, because there's an elasticity of demand. If you price people out of using public transport, guess what? They won't use it. They'll go on to they'll get in their cars, and that in itself will then make the roads more congested, which will impact the buses, and so the downward spiral starts again. So you really have to think holistically about how you manage these things, and you've always got to be mindful of unintended consequences. So the way I see it is, it's got to be a more diversified revenue stream. That government, it's very unusual to have a major transport undertaking, almost unique actually in the world, exception of Hong Kong. It's a very different model in Hong Kong, not receiving a central grant. So what we said that we've been working with government on is a desire by government to see TfL become self-sufficient by 2023. Now that's a big ask. So we really need to do our homework on that, and we've been tasked with coming up with a plan by the end of the year. My view would be, I want government to see TfL as a solution, not a problem. And I think at the moment it's seen as a problem. And I get it for government, don't get me wrong. The government has myriad problems with the impact of COVID, Brexit looming. You know, where's the money coming from? My argument is, if you invest in transport in London, it's money well spent. It's good investment, because if London's recovery will be powered by an efficient transport system, modernizing that transport system will help other government objectives. Levelling up, we spend 55p in every pound outside London. It's not spent in London. Steel from Scunthorpe, buses from Falkirk, buses from Guildford, trains from Goole, new Piccadilly line trains in East Yorkshire. That's levelling up to me. The government wants a green recovery. Okay, well, let's electrify the bus fleet. Let's get on with it. Let's speed it up. If the London bus fleet, which is 9,500, is electrified, that's a compelling production line for a British manufacturer, which creates jobs, and other British cities can follow on. So I think that the relationship will always be tense. There'll always be a creative tension between ourselves, DfT, Treasury, Number 10, because, you know, at the end of the day, it's a tough gig. We've all got challenges and we've all got pressures. But creative tension is good. Negative politics is bad. If politics gets in the way of good transport policy and funding transport adequately, then that's a problem. And my job as a public servant is to help the politicians navigate through that and see the benefit and see why TfL can be a solution, not a problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy. Laura, do you want to ask anything else on that?
No, happy for someone else to take a turn, Arthur. Thank you.
Okay, okay. I'll just check with Richard that we haven't got any burning issue coming from members of the public, but Richard, can you?
We haven't, no.
Okay, well, we'll continue as board members asking questions then. Thank you. Just in terms of the costs, I know, Emma, you were making some points earlier about cost overruns and the like, and the challenges around that. I wonder whether to bring you in, Emma, at this stage.
Hi, Andy. Yeah, I mean, I obviously really like what you had to say about Crossrail and getting that under your command and making those improvements. And I know in the past the criticism has been that so the news about cost overruns and time slippages has come as a surprise to people, that there hasn't been that kind of transparency in the past. And I'm just wondering if there's anything that you can say about how that's going to be avoided, because I can see you're really kind of staking your reputation on saying there will be no more slippages, there will be no more public money available. And, you know, could that lead to you being maybe a bit coy about if there are problems in the future, or, you know, how will you make sure that everybody kind of really does know what's going on?
Yeah, sure. So I am sticking my neck out. You're absolutely right, Emma. I could have just hidden behind the Crossrail board. I could have said when I arrived, this is great. Crossrail board, there's a separate entity, fantastic. There's a separate entity, Crossrail board, who have carriage of the Crossrail project to get it finished. And all I have to do is turn up on the opening day, whenever that is, and say, thank you very much, give me the keys, and we'll now run it as the Elizabeth line. I don't believe in being passive like that. I believe as a public servant, you should be held accountable. You should be transparent, and you should not recklessly, but you should be prepared to hold yourself accountable. So it just seemed to me someone needed to step up and say, give it to me, I'll get it finished. But it's not me, it's we, right? So I've got a very good team. Mark Wild's the CEO, and I think the CRL board actually did a really good job. They took over in 2018 in woeful circumstances, and they arrested a lot of the slippage. But we are going to finish this job off. So in making that public declaration, I didn't do so in a reckless. I've done my homework on this. I believe that at worst we can deliver this with no further slippage and no more money. But I'm aiming to do better than that. We are absolutely determined to do better than that. If we get off piste, and if that's not going to happen, then it will be transparent. There's mechanisms for that. The new Elizabeth Line Committee, which is a public meeting, which will be chaired by my boss, the Deputy Mayor. I expect to be grilled about that, and I would expect to hold myself accountable, and I would declare if there was a problem. Sometimes people say to me, well, what might throw this thing into disarray? I'd say really two main challenges. If there was an all-out, absolute, wild outbreak of COVID, then we may be back into trouble again. I can't control that. And obviously there's things you can do, and we are doing, with maintaining safe working sites. But if, say, for example, central government said, sorry, you've got to shut down all the work sites, okay, that's probably blown my ambition of opening or bettering the target. And then the other one is the unknown. In the glide path of any big project, the stations will be finished, you're into systems integration testing, you then do trial running, you then do trial ops, you get the safety case, and you open up. There will be some unknowns, some gremlins that get thrown up in that, where you think, how can that be? That's not what's supposed to happen in the design. Or individual components are working, but they just won't work well together. That is always a risk. But we're leaving nothing to chance. We've brought in additional people who are themselves expert at that kind of thing. So I don't believe that we will, I don't believe I'll come to regret that taking on of the responsibility. Someone had to. And if things start to go wrong, I will say on this, and I'm aware it's being recorded, I absolutely would not conceal that. No way. You're dead in the water, your credibility as a public servant. You only get one shot. And if you lie, or if you mislead, or if you conceal stuff, your credibility is shot. And I didn't do 31 years in this industry to wreck my reputation towards the end.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Emma? Yep. Okay, thank you for that. In terms of your experience elsewhere, Andy, I know that Safia wanted us to broaden this in terms of your experience. I mean, you've touched on this a little bit about learning elsewhere, but it'd be helpful just to understand a bit more. But Safia, did you want to raise that element?
Yes, Arthur. Good morning, Andy. Thank you so much for joining us. You have touched on it in different aspects. I just wondered if you could just elaborate. You've described London as a global city. You've got global experience. You've talked about Hong Kong. You've talked about Toronto, New York. So what are the lessons that you think London could learn from other transport systems around the world, and what would you like to see embraced by London in the future?
Sure. So I think, and there's some good comparators there. Certainly what Hong Kong does, and obviously these are tough times for Hong Kong as well for various reasons, but what Hong Kong does in terms of a funding model is exceptional, actually. I mean, it is helped by the fact that Hong Kong is a very densely populated city. If you go to Kowloon, it's just incredible, the density of that place. So they do actually have a very different funding model where someone once said it's basically a development company with a transport arm rather than a transport company with a development arm. So a lot of income is generated by over station developments, in other words, building like massive office blocks with a station incorporated, or getting third-party contributions. So I think we do some of that and increasingly we're doing that. And where once upon a time TfL might have sold off land and you know, okay, that's great, a one-off hit to, or influx, if you like, to injection to the bottom line. Now we don't do that. We work with developers to develop sites and get some revenue on an ongoing basis. So that's good. But I think we could learn more from Hong Kong about how it does things like that. I think Toronto does integrated transport really well. If you go, for those of you who know Toronto, you go, it's a system built in the 50s, but it was designed as an integrated transport network. So you go to somewhere like St. Clair West on line 1, and you come off the subway, up an escalator, and there, within the same complex underground, and that's good because it's kind of cold in Toronto in the winter, there's a bus waiting on one side and a streetcar, a tram waiting on the other side. And there's signage and everything is really well integrated. So I always think that's good. And New York City, we really did have things like public consultation was very good there. I mean, it needs to be. It's a very demanding stakeholder environment, in that you have what are called community boards and borough presidents, and so we really, I thought, had to earn our crust in terms of gaining community input to get any sort of transport change done, because people jealously guard their communities, and rightly so. And so you really had to excel, or your average New Yorker is not going to let you do something. So I think those are things we could learn. One thing I have learned, though, in working internationally is where we in the UK love to beat ourselves up. You know, we always, oh, we're terrible, mea culpa, everything's bad. Actually, you know what? If you work abroad, TfL has a stellar reputation. And there's a reason why. You go to Sydney, and that comes under the New South Wales government. I used to work there. Has shamelessly copied the model. And guess what? It's called Transport for New South Wales. They've absolutely modeled TfNSW on an integrated transport system, same as what we've got. It's a really good concept to have an integrated transport system, including planning and all the other elements that we have. Don't break that up.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I am aware I can't actually see everybody at the same time because I'm sadly on my phone rather than a laptop. So perhaps people can chip in at this stage, because it would just be helpful to put questions directly to Andy.
So Arthur, it's Alan. I was going to ask, I've got a very personal involvement. I'm in West London, and the Hammersmith Bridge is something that is occupying us rather a lot in West London. but I understand also that there are a number of other bridges that are in need of maintenance. And these are obviously often at borough demarcation lines, and there are difficulties at the moment identifying funding for maintenance. I wonder whether you could comment on Hammersmith Bridge and more generally on how we maintain these important river crossings in London.
Sure. Well, first point I'd make is I mentioned in my opener about the importance of state of good repair. State of good repair being, put simply, you must not get behind with maintenance, you know, the unsexy stuff, maintaining track, maintaining roads, maintaining bridges, maintaining signals. It's easy and tempting to cut back on your maintenance, you save a few bob, but in the long term, it's false economy because the need doesn't go away. In fact, it gets more intense as the pressure on old structures becomes ever more intense. And that's what basically happened at Hammersmith. This is a very old bridge that wasn't designed for the intensity of the weight of the traffic that it carries. And progressively, the bearings on that bridge seized up. It's effectively a suspension with cables, and the bearings seized up, and that meant the bridge couldn't flex as it should do. And because it couldn't flex, cracks developed. So the authorities had no choice but to take it out of service, and that should never have happened. Where things get more tricky though is clarity of who's responsible. So there's no dubiety whatsoever. There's no ambiguity rather on who is responsible for that bridge. It is the borough's asset. Period. People try to say it's TfL's asset. No, it isn't. We run the service across the bridge. The boroughs own it's jointly owned, as I understand it, between the two boroughs. But you know, we've got a part to play. We're not going to just sit back and point fingers. We made various efforts over last summer to come up with different alternatives. But the stumbling block was always the cost. There's a cost to just making good, but the cost to actually fully repair the bridge and restore it to trucks and buses and heavier vehicles is pretty substantial. So all sorts of options have been looked at, including demolishing it and building a replica, rebuilding it as it is. So now, anyway, we are where we are. We have just committed some money to procure a ferry service to at least provide a crossing. And that will buy us time working with the borough, with the DFT, with HMG, the Her Majesty's government, while that gets done. But my view is it's kind of a collective failure. It should never have got to that stage. Meanwhile, there are essential works going on other structures such as Vauxhall Bridge, Tower Bridge. You know, these are old structures in some cases. The works on Vauxhall Bridge, it's funny, I live in town and I jog across Vauxhall Bridge. So I'm an absolute pain in the backside to one of my senior managers because I'm always saying, when's it going to be finished? When's it going to be finished? I don't see anyone working. But there, as is often the case, the work has been extended because when the guys came to do the restore, basically renovate the roadway, the carriageway, they did find some deeply embedded old tram tracks in the base of the bridge that no one seemed to know about. But anyway, that bridge is almost complete, almost repaired. I'll probably go for a run later. I'll go and have a look and see how it's going. But we've got to get better collectively managing our portfolio of aging assets, and we must not let state of good repair fall behind. No way. Which is one of the reasons why, for me, in the funding negotiations, when we were under pressure to find further savings, and we capped it at 160, it didn't start at 160, it was higher than that. The red line was no way do we impact safety integrity of vehicles, of track and roadway, or of signalling systems. That is an absolute red line, and we maintained that.
Thank you, Andy. Just before I invite a couple of other questions, on that issue, we obviously had a 2-year window really on sort of on road maintenance other than emergency work, that sort of two-year holiday really. Is that something that you would just not be looking to do in future? That can cause more more problems and more costs than it actually would involve by doing the work?
Sure. Well, ideally not. No, I absolutely would argue against that. I mean, look, at the end of the day, you still got to be pragmatic as the leader of a transport authority. We don't have infinite funding. These are tough times for the UK. The UK has racked up so far a £2 trillion national debt. So we've got to be reasonable, and some non-safety critical deferral may have to happen. I'd rather it didn't. But if you can put things off for a little while, or do them in a more efficient manner, bundle them up in a more efficient manner, I'm not averse to that. What I am averse to is just stopping, because ultimately it's false economy. You will probably end up spending more in the long term because you've allowed the infrastructure, whatever it may be, to degrade to such an extent that where previously it might have needed a minor repair, now it's completely screwed and it needs to be fundamentally rebuilt. So you've always got to think these things through.
Okay, thank you. Karen, can I bring you in with a question for Andy?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Andy. It's been really interesting to hear some of your priorities. I wonder if I can get your reflections on the culture of TfL as an organisation, and whether or not you think anything there needs to change in order to help you deliver some of those priorities.
Sure. Well, that's a tricky question, actually, because by now I probably normally have a much better idea of the prevailing culture, because, as I said, I'm a great believer in managing by walking about. And that's not just going for a ride on the overground or wandering around tube stations. It's also walking the floor in offices, which right now would be a complete waste of time because they are absolute ghost towns where people are working from home. So I think I'd need to take that question on notice and answer it again in a year. But what I would say is I actually think there's a really good culture in that people are proud to work for TfL. People have passion about it. We have senior people, and not just senior people, but senior people who could absolutely earn double their salary if they went into private sector. They choose not to. They choose to serve the public. And I think that's often forgotten. There's always finger pointing at salaries. Actually, those individuals are highly qualified and could go somewhere else. But they choose to serve the public. That's what you do. I've been doing this for 30 years, 31 years now, public service. It's a calling, it's a vocation. But I think generally there is a passion for customer service. Most people want to do the right thing. Most people are proud to work for TfL. You'll always get the odd person who's maybe got a bit of an attitude, but I think the prevailing culture is actually very proud of what we do. There's a desire for excellence. There's a desire to serve the customer, and a determination to get through and beyond COVID, actually, and to do our bit for London, to get London back up on its feet, and I'd argue by doing that for Britain. It's one of the reasons I joined this company. We're critical to the future of the UK, I think. If London works well, the UK works well.
Right, that's helpful, thank you. And just a quick follow-up question before we come to Abdi. In your view, are there any ways or any opportunities that TfL and London TravelWatch can work closer?
Well, it's early days. I very much want to work with you. I value the work that you do. I've always, in previous jobs, we had there's a similar structure in TfL and New York City Transit. And I always think it's good to have a creative partnership. You should hold us to account. You should challenge us on occasion. But equally, where credit's due, if there's stuff that we do well or a need that we need external support on, such as funding, it's really, really powerful when the voice of the customer, London TravelWatch, is saying, well, we support TfL on this matter. In the same way as I really value things like our relationship with London First, the CBI. If only the transport, if it's only the transport undertaking that's arguing for funding, people would say, well, wouldn't you? Look at TfL asking for more money again. There's a certain self-interest. But if it's actually a clamour, a united voice across the whole spectrum of the customer representative, the watchdog, industry, then that makes for a pretty irresistible case, and we need to work together on that. So yeah, let's if there's things that we don't do very well, tell me about them. We are very we value the relationship and we're committed to it.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Andy. Abdi, do you want to?
Just a quick one, Chair. Thanks, Andy. My question relates to the buses, and we're hearing that bus fares are going up, and in fact, the buses are play a key role in moving people around in the capital. So many people are dependent on them, especially people from low income background. TfL is very well known to keep those fares very, very low, and it's been doing that for a long time. I just want to hear it from you, Andy. If you are, what are you intending to do in keeping the bus fares as low as possible going forward? That is one question. The other one relates to the SIP card and overseas free travel. These are some schemes that are very well versed in the legacy of TfL, and I would like to hear from you if you can safeguard these services or in your negotiations with the government in the future.
Okay, thanks, Abdi. Okay, so buses, yeah, you're absolutely right. Buses in many ways are the workhorse of London's transport system. We have a huge bus system, actually, 9,500 buses, where New York, obviously it's got a much bigger subway, but had 5,500. So this is a huge bus undertaking, and we're well aware that a lot of people rely on the buses, and actually a lot of people from lower incomes and less advantaged groups rely on the buses. So certainly from a social perspective, we're very alive to the fact that we've got to take that into account when we're looking at fares policy. One thing I should say straight away is you may have heard that no decision has been taken on fare rises. That's something that we've not yet concluded with the mayor, and that's a policy matter ultimately that the mayor will have to direct on, but no decision has been taken on that as yet. One thing though, that again, I got that question earlier about transparency. I also believe in straight talking as a public servant. I believe in letting you know the facts as a public servant. My job actually is to give frank and fearless advice and to advise politicians. It's for politicians to decide. But here's my frank and fearless advice. That ultimately, one of the downsides of COVID, the many downsides of COVID, is where TfL had almost got to break even, the Tube had almost got to break even, £1 billion taken off the cost base in the last 4 years, which is remarkable, it's unheard of. The Tube was going to make basically a small operating surplus. The Tube basically cross-subsidized the bus service massively. A huge cross-subsidy. That has almost gone up in a puff of smoke. So suddenly, more than ever, the bus service is in need of heavy subsidy. It in no way, shape or form covers its costs. And it can't now rely on the Tube to cross-subsidize it. So there are difficult choices to be made. But again, no decision has been made on fares policy, whether that be the Tube or the buses, other than in the funding deal, one of the conditions was that fares should rise by an average of RPI plus 1%. But how that's made up, the basket of that, has yet to be determined. In similar vein, the conditions that government imposed in the funding deal included that we continue the temporary changes to the congestion charge, and that the current ban on people with freedom cards over 60s using the card before 9 a.m. that has to continue. So that will continue until further notice. That was a condition of the funding deal. What the funding deal was silent on was the under 18s, actually. That was a condition of the previous H1 deal, it's silent on this. So I'm not pursuing that. Let's put it that way.
Okay, thank you for that. So I just wonder if I can, I think we have had a question through Richard from the public. Richard, did you want to ask that about buses, I think?
Yeah, of course I can. Yeah, the question has come from, let me tell you, Bus and Train User on Twitter. And it is, sorry, my technology's failing me a second. Yeah, can you ask Andy if he will change the extraordinary policy of not producing a bus map for London so that passengers can actually find out where bus routes go, rather like the underground map does for the tube?
Okay, I confess to not having been aware that we didn't produce a bus map. Actually, is the question for the whole of the network or for areas of London? Because I could see why there might not be one for the whole of the city, because it's such a huge network. I mean, we're talking about 700 odd bus routes, which would be an enormous map. But local maps, I'd be surprised if they don't exist. I'd have to take that away, actually, Richard, and ask my Surface managing director what the rationale is behind that. I mean, certainly there's lots of stuff online. Can I do a plug here, actually, for the Go app? We've just launched the Tfl Go app, and it's fabulous. I appreciate not everyone has a smartphone, but those people that do, all you have to do is put in basically where you are, where you want to go, and you're given all sorts of travel options. You can set criteria. You can say, I want to go on a bus, or I want to do the quickest journey, the most direct journey, and it sets it all out for you. It's really good. So effectively, it precludes the need for a map. But my guess is probably there's no overall map because it would be simply enormous. But I will check into that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's a very practical element. Emma, I think you wanted to come in with a particular question at this stage.
Yeah, hi Andy. We're doing London TravelWatch are doing a project at the moment, kind of canvassing people, Londoners and other stakeholders about what they think the transport needs of London are going to be once the pandemic is over. So how things have changed. You've talked about things like people doing more home working, for example. You know, there's been talk about things like, you know, 15-minute neighbourhoods, for example. And we were just wondering if you'd had time, you may not have done, to have a think about whether you think that there might be some changes that need to be made to make the transport system work better for Londoners once this is all over.
Well, we have actually. I mean, funny enough, I started my day by doing a keynote address for our analysts. Obviously, we have analysts, service analysts, and other analysts, and I was commending them for what a good job they do. Not least because the quality and the breadth of the thinking and the analysis in this organisation, I think, is second to none. And it was those same analysts who have come up with a number of scenarios for what may happen out of COVID, ranging, if you imagine a spectrum, ranging from the most positive being a V-shaped recovery, you know, suddenly the vaccine's found, fantastic, COVID disappears, and suddenly everyone comes pouring back, you know, it's as though nothing had ever happened and business is booming, fantastic, through to the opposite end of the spectrum, which is that London is fundamentally changed, that a lot of office towers never get repopulated, that the central economic zone looks completely different, that ridership is gone forever, or an element of it. And then three, because there's five models scenarios that we've modeled, three scenarios in between those two extreme poles. So yes, we have been thinking about that. Undoubtedly, my view would be, I don't think it would be either extreme. It's not going to be a sudden return as though it never happened. I don't think or equally, I don't think it will be, certainly not in the next 2 to 3 years, it won't be suddenly a ghost town in the center of London. I think there's probably the reality is somewhere in between. And I think people will look to work from home. Businesses will look to cut their head office accommodation costs. It's a revelation. Suddenly, do you really need this fancy office with all that overhead? You know, the actual shape of the service will have to flex to contain that. Maybe we'll have to put on more service in local town centres like Wimbledon or Morden, local centres. Potentially they might need more bus service all of a sudden because people are shopping locally and working locally. So we're on the case. It's a very moving feast. The fact that one minute you're in tier 2, the next minute you're in full lockdown. There's a lot of variables, but we've got quality people who are doing the analysis on that, so that we're trying to, if not stay ahead of the curve, try and keep up with what is a real complex situation.
Thank you, Andy. And perhaps we just move to one, I think we'll just last 2 questions. I'm conscious of your time, Andy, but if you don't mind just taking 2 more questions, and then we'll let you go. Perhaps Abdi, you had one question, I think, for Andy.
Yeah, it's very, very quick one. And when you're talking about the savings that you're going to make, potential savings, you talked about the areas that you're looking at, and you mentioned the possibility of deferring some projects. I'm thinking if you've got any projects in mind that you're likely to defer.
Okay, and a quick plug. I noticed on my system it just popped up that the Go app is only for Apple phones. It is at the moment. We're on the case. We're looking at developing that for Android ASAP. So just so that whoever put that up knows, we're aware of that limitation. Android is on its way. Projects. Well, in addition to the funding submission that we made to government, we also contributed to what's called the CSR, which is a comprehensive spending review, and we sent it in, and it's a public document, and we said in that document, and it was reported in the media, that for now we're not cancelling Crossrail 2, what used to be known as Chelsea Hackney, and we're not cancelling the Bakerloo line extension, but we are saying probably they need to just be deferred for a while. We'll safeguard the routes, we'll do the enabling works, we'll make them good for when they can be reinstituted. It's not that we don't think that they need to be done. On the contrary, we do think they need to be done, but we're not sort of immune to what's going on. To me, a submission that said, now where were we? Oh yeah, let's just ask for everything, would have been laughed out of court. If you were the recipient of a CSR submission and TfL just put in for everything and more, you'd probably send it back and say, can you be realistic? Can you send in a proper submission, a sensible submission, a serious submission? So those are 2 examples of projects that we want to do, but we'll probably have to wait a bit before we can start them.
Okay, thank you. And Alan, I think you wanted to ask a question, then I think we'll need to let Andy get on with doing all the work that he's been telling us that's going to happen. And Alan, do you want to ask a question?
So yes, just a final question. You talked in passing about how important you think accessibility is. One thing that you can't see over Zoom is that I'm a wheelchair user. So once all of this is possible again, I'd like to invite you to come out on the network with me and just have a look round and talk about what's good and what could do with improving.
Sure. I will happily publicly sign up to that whenever you're ready, my friend. I did it in Toronto and I did it in New York City. So just feel free to speak to your counterparts in New York and Toronto, and they'll tell you that they'll describe to you that this isn't just words. I'm passionate about the subject. Day one, when I arrived at New York, I stood outside Bowling Green Station to be met by a phalanx of cameras. It was unbelievable, the camera crews and all cameras flashing and everything else. And I listed off 4 things that needed to be done to modernize New York City Transit. And one of them was the third of 4 equal priorities was, I said, we cannot be proud of the transit system and the subway system until and unless it is fully accessible. And I'm sure, I subsequently found out, all of the lawyers' heads exploded in the building, the HQ building I was about to walk into. What's he said? They're suing us. Well, yeah, they are, but it's still the right thing to do. They were suing us anyway. It's the right thing to do. So I spent a lot of time putting money where my mouth was. We recruited for the first time ever New York City Transit recruited a senior accessibility advisor who served on my exec. It was an exec member. And it turns out it was done on merit. That person, very good friend of mine, was himself a wheelchair user. So he was on my executive. And so we spent a lot of time together going around the system. And it was humbling and in some cases appalling, shocking to see how bad the system was from a user's perspective. So I'll happily sign up to that. We'll go and take a stroll around. I actually went out with one of the advocacy groups. Again, that was somewhat controversial. People said to me, you shouldn't do that. They're going to use it against you. I disagreed. I wanted to see so I invited them. I said, let's go out and about on the system and we'll take a look at some of this stations. And the day we turned up at one of the stations and the elevator was working, which they were suspicious of because it often wasn't working there. And there was a bit of a suspicious smell of fresh paint. So I got the impression that my stations team knew I was coming, and so they'd tarted it up a bit and made sure the elevator was working. So I said to the advocacy groups, that was not deliberate. For the rest of the morning, you choose where we go. I can't possibly have influenced overnight everything to be working. So they chose where we went, and they appreciated that. So yeah, let's do it. Alan, let's go out.
Yeah, once the pandemic allows us, I will look forward to that. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, we'll do it. I'd love to do that. It'd be fun to go around with you and to get to know you and see what needs to be done.
Thank you.
One thing I feel strongly about is, of course, everyone talks about lifts, and lifts are important, but it's as much about cognitive disability, loss of visibility, visual disability, oral disability, signage, customer info. There's so many strands to this issue. It's not just about elevators, and even where it is, are they clean? Are they working? I have to say, in some cases, they were disgusting. So we put a huge amount of effort into checking the elevators were working every day, but having the cleaners regularly go in and clean them out.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, Andy, I know you will certainly find that the tour with Alan illuminating. I know from experience, and it's good that you are a runner because he does it at quite a high pace. So you'll be running around, but he'll show you some absolute sights. Some of them which are very good, some which I'm sure you'll agree will need some work. But I think that'll be a great opportunity for you both to be together. But I will draw this to an end now, Andy, because I really appreciate your time at such a busy time, and you've been very open with us as I thought you would be. So thank you for that, and we'll continue obviously our work very closely with Mark Evers and others in your team. I hope we're seen as a critical friend. We certainly, whenever we're putting our views across, it is very much on behalf of users, and I think I hope it's appreciated in that way. We know the challenges, and I think we're realistic sometimes as to what can be done and when. But we will maintain that link, and hopefully we can make things improve as quickly as possible. And I know that's your ambition.
That's why you're in this game, and that's why we're all at TfL are all in this game. We're in customer service. That's what we do. That's our job. So let's work together and improve things and pull out of this COVID crisis.
Great. Andy, thank you so much for your time, and we'll look forward to seeing you again.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Right, and I know it's slightly overrunning, and I apologise for the technical hitch at my end, but I hope to be back with you for the proper laptop after the break. Could we take 10 minutes then? That takes us till 10 to 12. If that suits everybody. Okay, see you very soon.
Right, welcome back. Can you hear me? Oh, okay. Right, I do apologise for the interruptions earlier, but thanks for making things happen when I wasn't there. And we've got workmen outside the house. I suspect that's related to the lack of broadband. BT people are working outside. Anyway, I'm hoping to be with you for the rest of the meeting. So let's start again. I think everybody's here now. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so let's start with the second section of the meeting. Certainly a useful discussion we had with Andy Byford, and perhaps we can talk through that a little bit later in our private session. But I think a very useful discussion. Emma, could we go back to your report? I'm sorry that I had to sort of bounce you into that a little earlier, but I think it'd be useful just to follow on from what you were saying earlier, and perhaps just to talk through the report in more general terms.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So yes, I was saying that I think things are continuing to go well, and our relevance of our work to Londoners is very high at the moment. Obviously, we're working against the backdrop of looming budget cuts next financial year, which we still don't know the scale of. So if I just do a quick report back on the kind of the 4 quadrants of our dashboard. Firstly, on campaigns and advocacy. As I said before, our kind of biggest success in the last couple of months is probably the establishment of our digital community of transport users, who seem very engaged, and we're very excited about that potential of that group to be able to tell us their views on transport in London as we go forward. On the Active Travel project, the Have Your Say guide continues to be downloaded as the debates kind of rage on about low traffic neighbourhoods and the street space changes. So that's evidence that this guide's still a really useful resource to people. On our new project on future transport, we've had a very high level of engagement so far, both from public and from stakeholders, which again I think points to the great kind of relevance of this project and a great level of interest in it. And I'd like to think that our research with young people made a contribution to the ultimate decision to retain free travel for under 18s in the recent financial deal with TfL. And I guess a notable success for this period is the announcement that Thameslink stations will now be added to the tube map by the end of the year, which is something that we called for over the summer alongside Assembly Member Caroline Pidgeon. So that's my kind of summary, quick kind of skirt through campaigns and advocacy work. On organisational development, we, London TravelWatch, has now been accredited with the Mayor of London's Good Work standard to replace our Investors in People accreditation, and we're looking at how we can build on that. On that accreditation and how we can kind of improve even more as an organisation. And of course, as Arthur mentioned earlier, we're trying to sublet our office at the moment so that we're in a better position to absorb budget cuts next year. So on to relationships. I think the big news for this period is that we had the results back from our satisfaction survey that we conducted with in the GLA with London Assembly members, and we were very encouraged by the results, which showed that nearly 3/4 of people surveyed thought that we were more useful than we were this time last year. So I think that's a really, really great kind of base to build on. In terms of complaint handling, we've increased the number of successful outcomes for passengers this quarter, and the questioning that we did of the Rail Ombudsman at the last board meeting has resulted in a concrete improvement where they've put more case studies on their website. So obviously the big news from since we last met was that TfL's funding for the next 5 months is now becoming clearer. And there aren't as many nasty surprises as we might have anticipated, which is useful to kind of hear that backed up by Andy Byford just now. But longer term funding for TfL is not yet certain. So there's a long, hard road ahead for TfL really with trying to kind of get themselves on a more sustainable footing post-COVID. So I think while we can plan our work to some extent for the next few months, I think it would seem sensible not to plan too far ahead, because there are significant uncertainties for London's transport users which we'll need to respond to. So I think I'll leave it there, and I'm very happy to take any kind of questions or comments or observations.
Thank you, Emma, and certainly some very encouraging responses coming from both from the Assembly, but I think also more widely in terms of media, and there's clearly a focus on a lot of the work that's being done here. So that's excellent. In terms of keeping that sort of resource available for the unknowns, and I'm sure there will be unknowns over the next 6 to 12 months, that's going to be key, and I think that's going to be a challenge for the organisation. Inevitably, there are things that we want to be doing anyway, but just keeping ourselves with a bit of spare capacity as far as we can for those unexpected issues that I think are almost certain to come up. How do you feel about that in terms of balancing the work that's being done at the moment?
I mean, I think we put off our business planning towards the end of this autumn, partly because we didn't know what our funding situation was, and that's still the case, and partly because we hadn't heard what the TfL finance deal was going to be. So I think we can go and do a bit of forward planning for the time being. I think potentially reactivating our work on buses, but I think, yeah, we certainly wouldn't want to commit all of our resources when we don't yet know, when this deal runs out at the end of March, and we don't know what the situation is going to be going forward, and what services potentially could be cut in the next finance deal. So I think we're going to have to, I think we could do a certain amount of planning, but we're going to have to wait and see as well. And also, obviously, the mayoral election is rescheduled for this May, and so we need to kind of keep an eye on that. And if there's a change of mayor, that will mean potentially a change of priorities for transport in London as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think the future of transport work is going to be very, very useful towards that mayoral campaign, assuming it all happens according to plan for May. A lot of that work, our work, I think will feed into that very usefully for all candidates. So I think it's good that we're ahead. That has a dual role. It's important anyway for users of the service, obviously, and for looking forward. But I think it's going to have that impact as well around the mayoral campaign.
Chair,
yeah.
Can I just jump in? A question and a comment. Firstly, the comment. Now the Thames link is back on the tube map. I noticed that Thames link won the annual World Cup of Tube Lines on Twitter last week.
Right.
Just as a piece of light news.
Good.
The question was around the recruitment of participants. I noticed that our Facebook adverts didn't work as we expected them to. We've clearly got a good selection of people involved that are really contributing, but I wondered whether we were planning to have another go at hitting our 5,000 target.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Richard might talk about this more a bit later. We saturated the market with our Facebook ads a bit faster than we were expecting, and certainly faster than our digital consultants were expecting. But it's not the end of the story. And as Richard mentioned earlier, we've had a lot of kind of organic, so that means kind of unpaid sign-ups just in the last week in relation to our future transport project, which is a really, really encouraging sign, and I think shows that we can grow this network over time. We've learnt a lot from working with these digital consultants on the first phase of the project, and we're going to be having a meeting up to talk about our digital strategy going forward, and I expect that will include ideas about how we can grow that community over time. And we need to be really mindful as well of the diversity of that community. It seems like transport seems to be the kind of people who are interested in about transport in London. The people who put their hands up and say they want to be involved in conversations tend to be older men. So actually it's been quite a challenge reaching a more kind of diverse range of transport users in London. So that needs to be part of our strategy. And so, for example, something that's really encouraging is that we've been when we did our research with young people around the zip card changes, we created quite a lot of new contacts, and we're going back to those young people and doing some focus groups about future transport needs. So we have more ways to reach younger people, for example, than we did a few months ago, and we need to kind of build on that success and see where we can use our experiences and contacts to grow our community, to make sure that it is more reflective of Londoners.
Thank you. I think I'd certainly support that diversity goal that we'd be looking for. But thank you for that.
Okay. Jackie, you had a question, I think. You're on mute, Jackie.
I think I sound better on mute. Sorry, I was just wondering, before I come to my question, on the topic you were just discussing, I believe there are women's institutes in London boroughs, certainly in outer London boroughs, if not in inner London boroughs. So you're saying predominantly male transport users on the panel. It may be worth contacting women's institutes to see if you can find, it's a pool of women, and they're not like they used to be years ago, just all elderly women. They're much younger profile these days, and they are, quite keen on community kind of activity and so on. So that might be a fertile ground to get in touch with. But that wasn't what my question was going to be. My question is about the office. Firstly, to what extent were we able to have anyone in the office between lockdowns? And secondly, how optimistic you are about being able to sublet it?
I'll answer the first part, and then I'll ask Richard to come in on the second part of your question, Jackie. Yeah, we did have a maximum of 3 people who wanted to use the London TravelWatch office, which was just right, actually, in terms of social distancing. We couldn't fit any more people in than that anyway. Obviously, we're now in a new lockdown, so no one's working in our office at the moment. Everybody's back to working at home, but we hope that those 3 people will feel confident and be able to come back again in early December. So we're kind of keeping an eye on that one. Richard, would you like to update on you've been taking a lead with the subletting of our office? I think it makes sense if you report back on that.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Yeah, over the last sort of few weeks, we've had some quite encouraging discussions with the landlords about the possibilities of subletting our office, and then I've engaged the services of an agent, commercial property agent, taking advice, and is now being marketed. So they tell me they have had interest. They believe the market may have softened a little bit, obviously with the lockdown announcement the other week, but they say they have let similar offices in the area, and they are as confident as they could be that they may well find a suitable subtenant. So yeah, we'll keep you updated though.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Karen.
Just to follow up, and there's no interest from the GLA. I noticed last week the mayor announced that he's definitely moving. That's the GLA onto fertile ground for this.
Perhaps I can answer, Emma, by all means chip in, but we have been pushing there have been discussions, as I think you know, Karen, about taking on some of the opportunity that might be there through a sort of relocation. In fact, it looks as if they're going to be using Union Street, which of course was where we used to be based, and there's quite a lot of space there. So that's their main focus at the moment. we do keep badgering them, and we do recognise, although it's a small accommodation, it could suit for a small team. So we certainly haven't given up on that, but at the moment we don't see an opening at the moment, which is why Richard is pursuing the market generally, so that we've got the two working in parallel. Emma, did you want to add anything to that?
No, nothing to add, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Emma around her report? No? Okay, well, thanks, Emma, for the report, and so I think it certainly gives a very wide view of what's being achieved at the moment. I think the coverage and the profile is certainly is pushing up, and that will help us in the digital work that we're doing. And I think where we can focus on particular groups, at least there's going to be an awareness of the work that's happening. So I think that's going to help going forward. So an encouraging start definitely on the digital side, and I think the media and coverage more generally will keep on. There'll be plenty to talk about, I think, without any doubt, over the next 6 months. So I don't think there'll be a shortage of issues. Okay, thank you very much, Emma. Right, Tim, can we move on to your safety report then?
Okay, so I'll mute myself. Apologies if the sun has suddenly come out in my conservatory. So if you find that there's a great big light shining on me that's distracting, that's why. Anyway, I hope you've been able to read the safety report. There are 3 areas of concern that I've highlighted there for you. One is obviously the coronavirus situation, and I've highlighted where various aspects of research are being carried out by DFT and TfL and other organisations, and I've suggested areas where we might get more involved with that. The second one really is about the tragedy at Stonehaven in Scotland, where following a severe weather incident, a train was derailed and then subsequently overturned, and 3 people were killed. And that really relates to how Network Rail and London Underground and other infrastructure providers really are tackling the issue of climate change and severe weather incidents. And the third one relates to the maintenance of rail freight wagons. There was a major incident at near Swansea in South Wales in I think it was late August, beginning of September, and that is notable because there have also been other incidents where poor maintenance of wagons has meant that there's been severe disruption to passengers, and including in London. And on the Barking to Gospel Oak line, you'll remember earlier in 2019 there was a major incident where a freight train derailed and carried on for about 3 or 4 miles and managed to do enormous amounts of damage to the track, which meant that services couldn't resume for weeks and weeks afterwards. And there has also been other similar incidents elsewhere. So those 3 are the 3 main areas where I've highlighted I think we ought to do some additional work, and I'll let you ask some questions.
Okay, thank you, Tim, very much for that, and yes, 3 pretty meaty issues there that you've been dealing with. So that's very helpful. Any particular questions for Tim? Jackie, and then sorry, Alan, I did see your hand, but I'll come back to you, Alan.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. I thought the piece about COVID-19 was particularly interesting, obviously, because everyone in London has a specific concern about travelling on public transport. But I was surprised that you didn't mention the Imperial College research, because I understand from the media that on 2 occasions now they have gone and tested surfaces in the underground and found no evidence of the virus at all, which I would have thought would surprise many people who imagine the underground is absolutely rife with it on every surface.
Okay. At the time of writing this, I didn't actually have that piece of evidence, but it is really surprising. But also, I think it's actually quite reassuring that they couldn't find it. I think that it's actually quite a surprising thing that to a lot of people that public transport is actually quite clean. And I realise I'm just disappearing into the dark there. And it's also interesting, I think, that other pieces of research have shown that where people have been sharing vehicles, private vehicles and other things, that those have been vectors for transmission of the virus, rather than public transport, where obviously there are regular cleaning regimes, that and also that actually people are in general, they're not actually spending an awful lot of an extended time actually on the vehicle. So passengers may be only spending, say, 10-20 minutes on a bus, but if you're travelling, say, with your a work colleague because you're doing a handyman's job or something like that, you might be travelling for more time. So I think that's an interesting finding, really, but also reassuring that the transport industry can get things right when yeah.
Can I come back, Arthur? That just to say, when you mentioned car sharing being identified as a vector, I wondered if that meant just people sharing private cars, or if it means things like car clubs, because I've been a member of Zipcar for a long time, but I haven't used it during the lockdown because I assume that it's totally reliant on individual hirers cleaning the car between hires. I'd be very surprised if Zipcar people go around each of the cars and give them a thorough disinfecting between users.
Well, that is a very interesting one. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe that's maybe we could ask that question of any car club operators. I don't know if any member of staff, some members of staff do use car clubs. So I could ask them whether what their experience is of that.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to notice as a side issue. Certainly, these car clubs have grown. I don't know what the level of hygiene and cleanliness is through COVID, but yeah, just check.
I mean, of interest for bus drivers, when there are frequent changes of driver during a vehicle's duty cycle, it's one of the questions that I actually asked of TfL, whether they've actually looked at how of cleaning regimes between individual, when a bus changes over at the bus garage.
Alan, I think you had a question, but just as Jackie was asking hers.
So a couple of questions, I guess. One is around the vegetation management and the landslip incident at Stonehaven. Could you comment, Tim, on whether there's a conflict between the need to remove vegetation to keep the tracks clear, but does that also mean that the stabilisation that vegetation gives to to banking, is that reduced? Does that increase the likelihood of a slippage?
Yes, Alan, that's a very complex question, because yes, I think it also depends on the type of vegetation and where it is, because some vegetation may actually, rather than stabilize the environment, they may shrink it. So depending on, for example, I'm not an arboriculturalist, but some trees extract more moisture out of the ground than others, and others have root systems that are more holding in than others. So I think Network Rail does employ a very and London Underground as well also do employ quite specialist teams of people that cover this area, and they did the Vardy report a couple of years ago on vegetation management, and that has instituted quite a lot of extra work and greater management of some of these assets. So I think that's useful. Where the area where I would highlight that there may be an issue is where there's, and this occurred in the Corby incident as well as the one at Stonehaven, is the management of, for example, drainage systems off the railway land. So the drainage system in Stonehaven, the drainage system from the fields above Network Rail's land, and which was not owned by Network Rail, was a factor in the flood event. Similarly at Corby, you had different bodies all effectively saying, well, it's the other body's responsibility to check rubbish filters, for example, on streams. So I think it is improving that. One of the key things really is going to be improving that relationship with other bodies outside of the infrastructure providers to make sure the things that they're maintaining actually are maintained to a sufficient standard. The other thing to mention really is about the fact that a lot of Network Rail's and London Underground's, to an extent, infrastructure is built to, or has been built to Victorian standards and understanding of how things should be built, rather than a more modern one. So, for example, the accident that happened at Watford Tunnel, that is in a place where the cutting sides in the approach to the station are much, much steeper than you would do in a modern railway system. And so it was in one sense, when you had a big event, rainfall event there, it wasn't as necessary. The material that could move from that was quite easy to move. Obviously, there are a lot of implications from trying to move things from a Victorian style thing to something else, because you'll probably need to acquire more land and do more remedial works to other people's property in order to minimise that risk.
Okay, thank you. The other thing was, you noted in your report that the Stonehaven fatalities were the first fatalities for some time on the line.
Yes.
That got me thinking about the platform train interface and the injuries, and I believe there have been some fatalities
yes
over the last couple of years falling between train and platform.
Yes. So
doesn't this count in the investigations? And I wondered whether it's something that TravelWatch should be looking at as part of the underground, because I know there are some incidents on the underground. Should we be investigating it?
The figures where it's like a fatality, where fatalities, it is if essentially it's where there is a moving train with persons on the train. That's where that figure comes from. Where it's the platform train interface, those are recorded in a different way, similar to how suicides, for example, are recorded in a different way. And yes, I think that there is the platform train interface is something that we've been concerned about. And I noted in the report, actually things like slips, trips and falls since the COVID lockdown have actually increased in proportion to the numbers of passenger journeys. So it's gone up by around 50. Although passenger journeys have gone down, the proportion of slips, trips and falls as against, I think it's 100,000 passenger journeys, has gone up by about 50%. And that's because people are not holding on to handrails because they're fearing that they might pick up the virus from a handrail. They're doing other things which causes them to slip and fall. Ironically, I nearly fell down the stairs at Crystal Palace Station because my mask misted up my glasses, and I couldn't find my way to the handrail to get myself down. Yeah, fortunately, I did manage to get out managed to stop doing it. But that is there are other things. There are a lot of other things that people are perhaps doing that perhaps they wouldn't have done if they were, able to have a sort of be less fearful of catching the virus, sort of thing.
Yeah, in a sense, I'm quite interested in that. So without taking up a huge amount of time, I've recognised there's a lot of things on, but if there is a significant trend starting, which
yes,
sounds to be from what you're saying there, 50% increase is pretty significant. In a way, that seems more pertinent to users perhaps than the air conditioning issues, which or the level of incidents we've got so far is very, very low. Obviously, we're talking about 1 in 11,000 is minute, isn't it? So I'm wondering if actually we can use our time better, focusing on these slips, trips and falls and what is being done. Why is that happening, perhaps? But is there anything that can be done to prevent that? Because it's a bit sort of counterintuitive. People have got more space at the moment. They haven't got the crowds, and yet the numbers seem to be going up. I suspect your mask element might be part of that. Actually, people do get steamed up glasses. And there is something slightly disorientating, I think, actually, about having a mask on. Things don't seem quite as clear. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, is that something we'd perhaps get more?
I think it's something we ought to look at. Interestingly, Arthur, when I raised this issue with Lily Matson, who's head of the safety at TfL, she said to me, well, actually, one of the reasons why there are more slips, trips and falls is because if you're on a bus or a train and it's crowded, actually the mere fact that you're densely crammed in actually means that if you fall slightly over, you probably fall into somebody else who saves you from falling onto the floor. And that's also a factor, I think.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just interested, but I'll let you take it away with other colleagues outside the meeting. But it's just, that sounds like it may be a one-off, but I've heard it from other sources as well that this is a bit of a trend that's going on, and it might be something we want to look at. Just in terms of that leads research that's going on, I suppose we need to know more about it before we get involved. But they seemed, the difficulty they're going to have is how many cases there really are. So that'll be the challenge. How do they identify cases that are meaningful? If we've got such a small, low incidence level, I'm not quite sure how that's going to work. But you're making inquiries into that anyway.
We'll see whether we can make contact with them.
Okay. All right, thanks, Tim. For any other questions for Tim? I think there's some interesting topics coming up in that report. Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Tim, for that. It was some helpful helpful points, and I think definitely around the vegetation element and Network Rail. Perhaps if you want to draft something around that, I think that's going to be an ongoing issue. It's not just Network Rail. I realise it's other providers as well, but I think we do need to just keep badgering at that, and including the ORR, because I know they've taken an interest in this.
Chair, Tim made I think 3 specific recommendations at the end of his report, so I'm just wondering if people are happy to go ahead with those 3.
Yeah, I think just on the, for me, just on the lead, that's why I mentioned the leads one. I just want to understand a bit more how they're going to do that work, because there's a slight risk that it could become a bit of a red herring, this incident, the number of infections on public transport. It may be, if it's so tiny that it's not really an issue, then perhaps we shouldn't be pursuing that. But I think I'd just like to understand that a bit more.
Okay.
Does that
okay?
Does that seem reasonable? But definitely on the other elements, I mean, certainly on the freight wagon maintenance, I think that's something we should raise. And equally, as I mentioned, the Network Rail ORR, I think around vegetation, I want it to be focused though around vegetation more than perhaps the litter and rubbish, because that seems a bit of a side issue, unless I've got something wrong there, Tim.
Well, I think the two are linked together, really. I mean, there are issues around litter, particularly on Network Rail, and especially on the electrified network, where the ability to short circuit things with either metal tins or plastic bags are the bane of overhead wires.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll leave it to you to draft that with talking to Emma, but we need to focus on, I think, what we are really saying. If it's related to the earthwork failures of the past, or if that's related to Stonehaven or whatever, then let's focus on that. But if you feel there is a wider issue, then by all means include that. But I still need to be convinced that we're not going off at a slight tangent there.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Any other thoughts on those actions? No. Okay, Tim, are you comfortable? I mean, obviously, come back if there's anything you want to discuss on that with either with Emma or myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Right. Thanks for the report, and thanks, Emma, just for making mention of the actions. That's helpful. Okay. Can we move on then to the casework report, Susan?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to update on the paper, just to give you a bit further information about what's happening right now. Obviously, the casework team deal with things in arrears, so we're still seeing casework come in because of it's happened before we went into lockdown. We won't see the quiet period until December comes in. So, but what I can tell you, which is very up to date at the moment, so over the last couple of weeks, calls coming into Ventrica did feature questions about face coverings and social distancing. Unsurprisingly, this last week, that's fallen off completely. So, but I suspect that once we come out of this particular lockdown and people start travelling again, that will change. At the moment, we get the most contacts we're getting is about penalty fares because of some northern TOC started issuing in them again in September and October. And obviously we're seeing that as it kind of moves through the process. The other issue that we've been experiencing, and it was resolved yesterday, I think, passengers who'd bought advance purchase tickets from retailers didn't have the same sort of flexibility as those who had purchased advance purchase tickets directly from the TOC themselves. So we had a lot of backwards and forth, and the caseworkers came to me. So I went to the RDG, who I know manage the retailers and ticket retailing as well. And they were very quick to get involved and very quick to help out. And that's now been resolved. And also the issue of retrospective claims, which the DFT said that passengers could make with advance purchase tickets. That's now been resolved, so passengers can change their ticket free of charge and travel later. I had a good catch up with Eurostar yesterday. There's a few things that came out of that. They're currently running 2 trains a day. One will go to Paris and the other will go to Amsterdam via Brussels, via Lille and Brussels actually, Monday to Friday, but they terminate in Brussels on Saturday and Sunday. No trains are stopping in Calais and no trains will be stopping in Kent until 2022. They have updated their website. There's a few things that I'm not satisfied with, or maybe that's quite a tame way of saying that I'm really disappointed. So I've written to them formally to express that, and I did that yesterday. And I think we're going to wait probably till the end of next week to see what comes back out of that. What is fairly interesting is under Belgium law, they can't offer catering until the train goes over the French border. I thought that just kind of made me smile a bit yesterday. Still a funny, stakeholder liaison is a lot easier when you're working from home because you don't have to travel everywhere, so everybody can usually spare you 30 minutes. So that's actually improved while we've been working from home. Working together with Transport Focus is going very well. London TravelWatch has traditionally answered to requests to review renewed passenger charters, or when they're rewritten, or if they're changing anything. But for those where we do them with, or Transport Focus responded as well as London TravelWatch, we're working much closer with Transport Focus now. And the last 2 that I've done in partnership with Transport Focus, feeding into what they were saying, and then they responding on behalf of both organisations, which makes things a lot more straightforward. And obviously it may go in the other direction where we're dealing with more London-based TOCs, such as Great Northern or perhaps Thameslink. Yeah, I think that's the most up to. We are still receiving a lot of contacts regarding people who want to surrender their season ticket and want it backdated to March. So that's quite challenging conversations we're having with passengers. Is there any questions?
Can I just ask one to start with? We don't quite know what's going to be happening around fares in the new year, but that there will be an announcement shortly as to what the level of fare increase will be across the railways. I assume that's quite often a busy time for your team. Is it when fares do go up, or does that not affect your workload?
No, we do get them, Arthur, but they're not really anything the caseworkers can impact. So we can't impact fare increases and we can't impact timetables. No. The best we can do at those situations is to advise the passenger that we will tell the TOC, take it back to the industry, but the caseworkers will not be able to change a fares increase. So it's if we take it up as an appeal, we know we're going to fail at the outset. So there doesn't seem to be a lot of point doing them as an individual appeal.
Yeah, exactly. So, and we've had discussions separately, haven't we, about trying to streamline the work that your team is able to do and try and focus on those areas that you can do something about, and largely send away those that you can't for the good reason. It's better that your time is spent achieving things for users. So that's going to be important, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're definitely, I mean, to look at changing casework doesn't actually mean it will get worse. I mean, some people obviously may have challenges with change and look at it as worse, but I think that casework could be actually made more robust, more informative. We can join up the loops with the different departments like policy and comms. So I think we could actually come out of this with actually a better model than we have now.
Okay. Good. Any questions for Susan? I think that's a thorough report, Susan. Anyone?
Yes, just a couple for me. So on page 7, Susan, can you explain what some of the appeal outcomes are? Obviously, I understand decisions in favour of the consumer or the rail operator and mediation, but what's simple administrative, simple other, and split decision? I'm not quite sure I understand how they're categorising some of those things.
Are you looking at the Rail Ombudsman chart there, Karen? Yeah, okay. So, from bottom up, a split decision would mean that they've negotiated that the passenger and the operator meet halfway. Simple settled prior to mediation, it would have meant that the case was going towards mediation and then it was settled. And simple would mean, you know, something like looking for a refund or compensation for an event that happened. There's nothing really complex about the cases like we have with season tickets, for example. Simple other, I suppose, captures everything that's not otherwise listed. Simple administrative could mean a change, a ticket change, something like that. Mediation is when the passenger and the operator has entered into mediation with the Rail Ombudsman, and then the top two are fairly self-explanatory.
Yes. I just think if you're looking at something that's settled prior to mediation, then it's settled one way or another in favour of the consumer or the operator. So I'm not quite sure I understand that. I mean, I guess what we want to understand coming out of the appeals process is how many decisions are in favour of the consumer and how many are in favour of the rail operator, because that says that then has an opportunity to feed back into rail operators to say somewhere along the line your processes are wrong and need adjusting and need improving. And I'm not sure that this helps us understand that, particularly when settled prior to mediation is 50% of the pie chart.
Well, settled prior to mediation is pretty much what London TravelWatch and Transport Focus did before. It's just somewhere to write into and someone to take up the case on your behalf. The decision made in favour of the consumer is only, or made in favour of the rail operator, is only put in if the Ombudsman has to take a decision. So up until that point, what the Rail Ombudsman do is pretty much similar to what we do. There is really no difference. And these categories, I know they're difficult to understand, but they're not created from us. They are put in from somewhere else. So I can't change them, and I don't actually know what they all are or what they refer to, because I pull this information off the Rail Ombudsman web portal as well. So, and that's the best that they have.
I appreciate it. It's not you that's putting the stats together. I think an opportunity back to them perhaps at some point.
I do think it's worth mentioning maybe going forwards, if changes can be made, this may be something that we want to change to make it a bit more transparent. It's a good point, and I will take that forward.
That's useful, Karen. I think it is. I know Susan has a number of issues that she raises with the Rail Ombudsman. I think there are a number of areas where there can be more transparency and just clarity. And I think that pie chart probably is one example. But Susan, I know, will be on that case.
A very quick comment. And I just wanted to note the positive customer comments that are in the back of the report that highlight the thoroughly good work of all of the team. Particularly, I notice Mag's name keeps cropping up. I think it's also worth noting in the report that passengers who've gone to the Ombudsman and haven't received an outcome that's satisfactory can come to us, and often we get a positive outcome from them. So I think that's, again, worth noting the success of a team and worth patting them on the back.
Thank you, Alan. I'll make sure that gets fed back.
Yeah, and I know there's just a case just only in the last few days that FASA was involved with, which is, I think, phenomenal success that she managed to deal with. So these are happening all the time, and it's yeah, it's great that we're having that impact. So thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions for Susan? No? Okay. Thanks very much, then, Susan. Right. Richard, can we move on to the impact of your influencing activity?
Yep, thanks, Arthur. I think Emma's gone through quite a few of the sort of media highlights, but I'll mention another one that I've picked up in my report. The Guardian picked up on our congestion charge blog, which all this debate about possible extension of the congestion charge, and we then use that as a way of sort of leading the debate on roads pricing and opening that one up again. So that was well received by the Guardian and on social media and on Facebook as well, which we're continuing to sort of build on there. Yeah, very good media coverage in general. I think that our profiling continues to increase. Got some good interviews with LBC, becoming sort of quite a regular thing. Arthur's done one or two, and Emma's done quite a few. So that's really positive, I think. Yeah, social media engagement has been very good, and numbers of followers on Twitter have been going up, and Facebook as well. We obviously started from a low base. We only just started this summer, but that's we're getting into that, I think, and things like the congestion charge thing struck a chord, and sort of the number of views on that one were like 900 on Facebook when we had a very low numbers previous to that. And that leads nicely into the sort of future transport work and our digital work, and these things sort of working in tandem. So I've got some good figures for you, up-to-date figures. As of this morning, we've had 864 responses to our future transport survey, which is SurveyMonkey one, and they represent people across the boroughs. Every single borough is represented, which is really good. And the other good news is, I was talking about the virtuous circle earlier, 441 of them have left their email address to join our digital community. So a few of them may be duplicates, but yeah, most of those will be new organic members. And so I think that bodes really well, going back to what Alan was saying about how we're going to grow this community. And we're not going to be far off 5,000 very soon, really. We said 5,000 by the end of October. But yeah, with at this rate, we will be there, I think, soon. So very positive there. And the Have Your Say guide, we've used social media very well to promote that, and that's now had over 600 downloads on our website. And another example, I suppose, of how we're working well with Transport Focus, we use there, as well as sending out to our digital community about the survey, we asked them to send out to their 2,000 members of London-based members of their transport user panel. So that's really helpful as well. And just finally on that, we've got quite a few interviews lined up for this future transport project. We've got just secured one with Amy LeMay, the Mayor's Night Tsar. We've got meetings planned with Caroline Pigeon tomorrow and Caroline Russell, as well as ones with Mark Evers and the Director of City Planning at TfL, Alex Williams. Quite a good selection of them, and yeah, we hope to get some written responses to our call for evidence as well. And then we confirmed the webinar for the 3rd of December at 2 o'clock. So we'll sort of feedback our initial thoughts Hopefully that's in your diaries. I think Luke sent an invite out, and then we'll obviously write that up in full in the new year. So happy to take any questions. Quite a lot mentioned there, but hopefully I've given you a flavour of everything we're up to.
Yeah, no, it was all good, and we were on the London segment of Breakfast News the other day as well. I noticed. I thought, whoa, great! We're going to mention.
We were, yeah. It's difficult to keep up with it now.
It is.
No, it's excellent. It's just, and we are getting approaches from various organisations now expecting a comment on key issues. So which is something we haven't been doing so much in the past. So well done. I think these links are very important. Just in terms of the radio stuff, particularly I think LBC, I don't know whether it's worth us offering to do a regular travel slot, monthly or whatever, or whether we just want to stick to reacting to issues. And I think they're always keen to have people on who've got expertise. It might be something we can offer to them, but that depends on how much time is available. You may prefer, Emma and Richard particularly, to stick to dealing with particular issues, but it's just a thought. They're keen to have experts on, so we might be able to get a regular slot on there.
Yeah, we'd certainly take that away. Have a think about that. Yeah, never know. Emma might be having our own show every Friday. That's what it felt like at one time when we were getting approached. As soon as I sent the omnibus findings to everyone, LBC were getting back immediately. So yeah, we'll have a think about that.
Yeah, it's just that there is so much going on at the moment. I don't think we'll ever be short of things to say. I think in the past we've probably not done things like that because what would you talk about? I don't think there'll be any difficulty over the next 6 to 9 months, but I'll leave that with you anyway, just as a thought. Any other questions for Richard? No? Okay, well, thank you, Richard.
Thanks very much.
Very helpful. And yeah, keep on that good work moving forward. Okay, and let's move on then to the finance report. Do we have Shahid? I don't think I've seen him. We do, sorry. I've got my screen split.
Morning, everyone.
Shahid, apologies. Right, welcome. Right, Shahid, do you want to just take us through the report?
I will do, thank you. I presented the draft figures to the end of September to this month. We had a few system problems which meant we weren't just able to finalise them. However, I'm pretty certain they're sort of factually correct, so that's all good. Main things to note: we're looking in a fairly good position. We're on target to deliver to a small saving of around about 16,000 back to the GLA this month. Main things to note: some additional funding has now been agreed with Transport Focus to extend the HR advisor post. So that's another possible saving of around about £7,000. Other than that, everything else is kind of as we expect it to be. It's all in line with the forecast. We are planning on doing a reforecast exercise over the next few weeks. See where we are after that. And then in terms of the future outlook, we are still waiting for confirmation from the GLA to what the required savings are going to be in coming years.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned earlier, hopefully we get a bit of white smoke on that fairly soon as to where we're going. But okay, but in terms of the actual preparing the report in future, we're through those system problems now, are we, Shahid?
We are just finalising them, hopefully within the next couple of days. It's just an interface between the finance system and Excel, which we're using for reporting. So I think Sandra's on to Sage today,
okay,
to resolve that issue, hopefully.
Okay, thank you. Right, any questions for Shahid on the finance report? I can only see half of you at a time at the moment. Just,
yes.
Okay, Jackie, sorry.
Yeah, when you're talking about funding from and to reserves and reserves at the year end, this is me, can't remember, or maybe I wasn't at the meeting. Did the board decide to change our reserves policy?
Yes, I believe it was a collective decision to revise it down to
Well,
45,000.
it was, I can't remember it when it was.
Right. Yes, I mean, we did have quite a high reserve, didn't we? And I know last year we felt that had been too high. So the idea had been to reduce that, and we feel that 45, 50 is about the right level now.
Yeah, that's in my memory then. Thanks.
Okay.
I was going to ask the same question, Jackie, so
Right,
don't worry about
okay.
it too much. But also
not
on the
just me,
reserves.
and it's not senility if you
No.
can remember either.
On the reserves, Arthur, I just wanted to check that we're comfortable that's still the right policy given the spending climate that we're moving into. Is there anything else we should consider investing in, or is it too late for that decision now?
Well, I might pass on to Shahid and Emma on this, but from my perspective, I mean, as part of the discussions, we will certainly have to review the reserves. Clearly, we don't want to cut it so low that we have no movement or no opportunity for movement at all. But you're absolutely right. This will be one of the things we will have to look at closely. For any savings that can be made, but providing we're not creating other difficulties for ourselves. And I think Shahid's advice certainly has been that this is about the right level, even going forward, because things just do happen. But Shahid and Emma, if you have anything you want to add on that.
I'd agree with everything you said, Alf. I think we need some kind of level of flexibility, and this to me it feels about right, about the 45,000-50,000 pound mark.
Yeah, which is about just under 5% of our budget. So it's it seems about right to us. But Emma, did you want to add anything there?
No, but obviously when we do know what our level of budget cuts are, we've got some quite big discussions to have, haven't we, about the best way to make those. And I guess this could come under the heading of that discussion.
Yeah. And just on that, I mean, it may well be that we do have to have a discussion as a board at fairly short notice once we have a bit more knowledge of what the settlement is. Clearly, we won't leave that to our next board meeting. We'll need to get together and just have a discussion on that. So you'll certainly have an input into that, and this is one of the areas that is worth discussing, I think. Alan.
So it's really a question for Emma rather than Shahid. I notice in the report that we've got lower training and development costs. We've never had a very large staff training and development budget. I assume the lower costs are related to COVID and less opportunity for these things. Are we ensuring that staff are receiving the right training and support in the pandemic?
Alan, I think if you remember, we got asked by the GLA if we could make some in-year savings. So what we had to do is look at all of our budget lines and work out where we could give some money back. And we haven't yet been asked to hand over that money, but we've been asked not to spend it. And one of the budget lines that we reduced was the training budget. I don't think we've had an underspend in some other areas, which potentially gives us a bit more space to kind of up the level of that budget if we need to. But I'm not aware of any training requests that have come to me that we haven't been able to manage. So I don't feel like we're selling anybody short on that this year.
It's just a concern that we're giving the staff the support that they need, really, that's all. And I think what you're saying is, yes, we are.
I believe so, Arthur, yeah. I'm sorry, Alan.
Okay, that's a fair question, Alan, thank you. Any other questions for Shahid on the report? No. Okay, Shahid, thank you very much. And yeah, so that's helpful. And thanks for making it so simple for me particularly. So I was able to follow that fine. So that was helpful.
Oh, thank you.
Good. Okay, if we just move on to really just the last element, board meeting dates, which Luke has put together. So please just note those if anyone has any particular issues at this stage, let me or Emma know, but hopefully people can include those in their diaries going forward. Okay. Right. So I think we can move, unless anyone's got any other business for the public session, we'll move into the private session. But does anyone have anything they want to raise?